A pioneer is a trailblazer, a person who prepares the way for others. The Rio Grande Valley has been home to pioneer authors, folklorists, and educators. During the 1950s, few women, and even fewer minority women, attended pharmacy school in Texas. Yet one young Latina from Harlingen, Texas, not only received her pharmacy degree from the University of Texas at Austin, but also became the first Hispanic female pharmacist in the Valley. What follows is the story of this intelligent, resilient woman whose legacy as a Frontera pharmacist has left its mark on Los del Valle.
Well, I was born and raised here in Harlingen. I lived in San Antonio for a while and then in Austin when I went to UT Austin, but then I came back. My family was one of the first families here where they were pioneers. In fact, my mother was from Brownsville, but she was teaching here at the Saldaña Ranch. And the Saldañas had a big ranch, but they wanted a school for their own children. There weren't any in Harlingen yet, and for their workers. And they brought her from Brownsville to come and teach. And then, of course, you know, at that time, there were no hotels, and families didn't let their daughters go to another city to work, you know, unless they knew who they were staying with. So she came and stayed with the Lozano family. She was Villarreal. And that's where she met my father, when she was staying at his family's home. So they got married. And then she would tell us that in 1904, when the train came in, she and her children all ran from school, from like around Fair Park, more or less, in that area where the auditorium is, to the railroad track that goes by here, very close to us, to watch the train come in. I went to the old Alamo School here, which was a grammar school close to me here. And then since then it's been torn down. I went to school there. A lot of the Hispanics went there. Then I went to, when I went to middle school, they call it junior high. And I went to school at junior high. Then I went on to Harlingen High School, and I graduated from there. For a while, I didn't know what I wanted to do. When I graduated, most women either went into teaching or nursing. That was about the only fields that were open, you know, for women. And neither one, for some reason, didn't entice me too much. So I started working for a while. And I did office work. And it just happened that one of the offices where I worked, right next door to us was McPherson's Pharmacy. And you may have heard of McPherson's here. They've been here for years and years. And this was just a building that he was renting at that time. And the doors to the office and the pharmacy were like this. So they were almost open. You could just, there was no air conditioning at that time. You could just go in from one place to the other. And he and his workers knew no Spanish. And of course, we had a lot of Spanish people here, and they would ask me to come translate for them. Like I said, we're giving this man or this lady a prescription, and we cannot tell them how to take it because they don't know English. Come translate for us. So I would go and translate for them. I'd go back and forth. And that's how I started getting interested in pharmacy. I hadn't even thought about pharmacy. And I could see on the counter, they had all the prescriptions that were coming to be picked up. And I could see that some were liquid, some were tablets, some were capsules. And I started thinking, why? You know, why do some come in one shape and form and some in another? So I started getting interested in pharmacy. And I finally went to pharmacy school. I did go to Texas Southmost College. Of course, it was much smaller then. I remember, is it Gorgeous Hall? Yes, I remember that. And I remember our chemistry labs. I remember Mrs. Wilson, she was my chemistry teacher. And then I took biology with Mrs. Warburton. And those are the two that really stand out in my mind. And there were a lot of young people then, a lot of Hispanics. There were a lot, and there were other people from Harlingen that were going. And we would ride the bus. We would take the bus. That was a dramatic change. I was very, of course, I was glad I was accepted, but I was surprised too. And I really had no problems. Some people have told me they had some problems with prejudice with Hispanics. I never went through that, so I really have no experience with that. But I have heard of that. But I did have good grades in high school, and I think that helped me, to be accepted. And of course, I like football. We would go to football games, and I would get to that stadium, and at that time it seated 72,000 people, and I would think that's even larger than the city of Harlingen. It was flabbergasting. So many people. But I thoroughly enjoyed the football games and my stay there. So I really enjoyed it there. Of course, it was hard work. And you have a lot of labs with pharmacy. You have biology lab, you have chemistry, you have physics, and 2 or 3 times a week I would have a lab from 2 o'clock in the afternoon till 5, while all the other kids were at Barton Springs. They would go swimming or having a good time, and I thought, here I have to be in lab, from 2 to 5. But it was hard work. It was. I really had to work at it. And I kept praying and saying, dear Lord, if you don't want me to fall into pharmacy, don't let me pass anything. Then I'll know you don't want me in pharmacy. And at that time, there were not too many women in pharmacy. I remember that in my class, there were just 3 of us. And one was another Hispanic girl from Laredo, and an Anglo girl, but I don't remember where she was from. There were just 3 of us. But the boys were very good about helping us, especially in lab. They would help us by do this way, and they would help us, with the test and all of that. So everybody tried to help each other out. But I kept going. So I graduated in 55. I remember when we were still in class, and we would complain to the professors, we have so much work to do, and the professor would tell us, if you think you're busy now, wait till you start working, then you're really going to be busy. And that was true. When I came home, of course I lived here in Harlingen, but there were no vacancies when I came in Harlingen. All the drugstores had the pharmacists that they needed. But I did find a job in San Benito with a pharmacy there. And so I started working there. I had no money. I had to start working, right away. And I worked there 2 years. But what was interesting was that while I was working there at the drugstore, it was the type of drugstore that, like in the past, they had the fountain, and everything. All the school kids would come in to eat at lunch and have their drinks, and the root beer floats and the Coke floats. Those were the popular things at that time. And even employees from other businesses would come in and eat. And one day I received a phone call from a friend of mine that worked here at Valle Baptist Hospital. At that time it was Valle Baptist Hospital. She was a secretary to the administrator. And she says, Olga, our pharmacist is retiring, he's quitting. Would you like to come work over here? They asked me to call you to come in for an interview. And I said, well, I've been here at this drugstore for about a year, and I'm very happy here. I like it. And I'm not the kind that like to be changing jobs, here and there. And I said, no, I think I'll pass on it. I'll stay here, but thank you anyway. Okay. Sometime later, she called me again. She says, when you were not interested in the job, and the hospital hired a woman pharmacist, and now she has found out that she's expecting a baby, so she's quitting. Would you like to come work? And then I thought, well, this is the second time this comes up. Maybe I had better look into it, but I had never done hospital pharmacy. And so I came and interviewed with Mr. Morrison. He was the administrator at that time. And I saw the pharmacy, what it looked like, and all its work. And I said, well, I'll give it a try. I'll try it and see if I like it. I'll stay, not I'll go back to retail pharmacy. So I took the work, I took the job, and I was there 29 years at Valle Baptist, 29 years. And when I started, I was the only pharmacist because the hospital had about 125 beds. It was a small hospital. We had people that worked at night, of course, the second shift. I worked during the day. And finally, it was too much for me, so I started hiring a technician to help me during the day, then another technician. And the hospital kept growing. And I thoroughly enjoyed my work there. I thoroughly enjoyed it because I feel like in hospital pharmacy, you have a better overall picture of pharmacy. Because in the drugstores, you deal mostly with your oral medication. In a hospital pharmacy, you have the injections, you have the IV solutions. You supply the medication for other departments like X-ray, radiology, X-ray, laboratory, physical therapy, all the things that they need with their work. So you become acquainted with the things that they use, the medication that they need. And I think it gives you a better overall picture of all the medicine, all the medication that is used in the health field. And one interesting thing was that in the health field, you never get in a rut because things were always changing. New medicines coming out or new treatments for the patients, and you need to learn about new medicines for those treatments. New doctors came in, you talk to them. And we started getting a lot of specialists. At first, we didn't have too many. Most of them were general practitioners, family doctors, surgeons. But then we started getting a lot of specialists here in Harlingen. So we would talk to them and see what their needs were, what medicines did they expect us to keep for them for their specialty. So it was always very interesting. It was a constant change. It was always something new. Well, a typical day would, of course, be filling orders, talking to people that need information, ordering medication, answering the phone. It never stopped, answering the phone. And that would be and having all the medicine that you needed on hand, which we always try to do anyway. A not good day would be when there was an emergency or something different came up, and you had to scramble to find medicine for the doctors. We used to have a Southwestern Drug Company here, which was, it sold medicine, and it supplied us, and their supplier to them was in San Antonio. So we had a good medicine, we had a lot of medicine available here. But then sometimes there were things out of the ordinary, or something unusual happened with a patient and the doctor needed something different. And I would call other drugstores or would call other hospitals in the area to see if maybe they had it. We were always helping each other out. If they would borrow from us and we would borrow from them. Like sometimes the Sioux in Brownsville would borrow from us like snake, anti-venom. For some reason, they might run out. They might have too many cases, or sometimes we ran out and we would borrow from them. So everybody was always helping. That was an atypical one. And you would order it, and even the wholesaler would say, we don't have that, we don't carry it, we'll try to get it for you from San Antonio. And you would tell them, please get it as soon as possible, whichever way you can, the quickest way, because the doctor needs it for a patient. That would be a bad day. You would get headaches. You would get headaches with that, and you would worry. You would worry about that. In the later years, it was decided that instead of the nurses rewriting the orders from the doctor's orders and sending them to the pharmacy, the original sheet, the original order written by the doctor would be sent to us. Then, of course, it was hard sometimes reading the doctor's orders, which we, of course, were used to a little bit on prescriptions, but they had the little abbreviations and little lingo, for the hospital. You finally caught on to all of that. Not that I know of. It was funny because we could see their writing on prescriptions and on orders, and then sometimes we were always having workshops, and everybody, nurses and technicians, everybody keeping up to date. And we would have a doctor as a speaker on a certain subject, and they would write on the board, and they would write so clearly. I thought, why can't they write like that all the time? And then we were using medication cards, because in the pharmacy we had what we called a dumbwaiter, a little elevator, and all the orders came on the dumbwaiter, and we would send them back on the dumbwaiter because it was easy for all the nurses' stations, all the floors to be close to the dumbwaiter and go pick up their orders. Afterwards, the hospital grew so much, it was spread out, and that elevator was, and the dumbwaiter was not enough. So we started using medication carts, and the medication carts had one drawer for every patient in that area. And then we had emergency drug carts on the floors. That was something new also. You would put in that emergency cart anything that would be necessary in an instant, whether it was a heart attack or somebody was bleeding or whatever. It was right there. They didn't have to call the pharmacy and the pharmacy to hurry to get it there. It was right there on a cart. And we had to keep that cart up all the time to keep it full, and that everything did not go out of expiration date or something like that. Now, from what I hear, pharmacists make rounds now with the doctors as they make rounds in the hospital. And so they're able to talk to the doctor and take the orders direct from them. And if the doctor maybe gives the name of a drug and doesn't give the size or the strength, the pharmacist right there can ask about which strength do you want? Do you want the 20, the 50 milligrams or whatever? So there have been a lot of changes, and pharmacy is getting more and more involved in the practice of medicine in the hospital. Very much so. To tell you the truth, I hated to retire, but I knew it was time, and I thought, if I wait for a better time, I never will. I never will. So I retired after 29 years, yes. But it was a very rewarding work. I enjoyed it every day. I feel sorry for people that say, oh, I have to go to work tomorrow. They don't enjoy their work. I did. I really enjoyed it. And I enjoyed the people, talking to all the employees, the nurses, the doctors, administration. It was a constant thing, talking to other people and getting along, going to meetings and things like that. So it was very interesting. It's a very rewarding profession. It is. Well, there's some fundamental books used in pharmacy. I have some of my books. Some are on chemistry. I have the USP, the United States Pharmacopoeia, which is like the Bible for drugs. They have to meet certain standards. If they don't meet those standards in the pharmacopoeia, they're not accepted by the Food and Drug Administration. We had dictionaries. We had a lot of different types of books on chemistry, biology, especially on arithmetic used in pharmacy. We had a lot of that. We had special books. We have the little book that I have on arithmetic is a little book. It's not about this big and not very wide. And I think that's one of the books that I use more than anything else. And of course, we had the formulary, which is used even now by doctors in hospitals to keep up with medicines. We have books that maybe are sold by different brand names, but they're the same drug, and you could look in that book and see if maybe you didn't have it under one brand name, you might have it in another brand name, and you could use it because it was the same thing but under different brand names. Then, of course, generic drugs came into being during my time. And of course, it was much easier for me to remember the brand names because they were shorter. Like with the generic name, it was a long, like for instance, the brand name Tylenol. The generic would be acetaminophen. It was a much longer word, even longer to write out. It took longer. And I always preferred the brand name, so you had to get used to all the generic names too, because they were coming up. And you had to be sure that if you used a generic drug, it met the qualifications of a regular brand name. We had books on that too, to be sure that it met all the qualifications of the brand name if you were going to use it. It had to be exactly, it had to be the same.
Well, my name is Robert Autry. My wife, Linda, and I own Autry Pharmacy here in Brownsville, Texas. And I graduated from pharmacy school in 1978 and began practicing in a chain store in Dallas. And at that time, pharmacy was totally different from what it is today, in that the number of medications that were on the market were significantly less, as well as fewer medications with similar names as we're having to deal with today, but also the workload and the actual job itself was totally different. In those days, we were strictly thought of as counters and pourers. Now, pharmacy has changed dramatically since that point, in that now then patients are very involved, and patients should be involved with their own care. They should question whether or not the doctor is diagnosing their condition correctly, and they should also question whether or not the medication they're taking is there to help their condition. And that's really more of our role today than the counting and pouring. The counting and pouring has been passed off to the technician.
Yes, my name is Melinda Slovak, and I'm a registered pharmacist here at Autry Pharmacy. I graduated in '92 with my Bachelor's of Science in Pharmacy from the University of Texas at Austin. And I've been, when I first initially started out, I worked for 3 years as a hospital pharmacist at Brownsville Medical Center. I come from a family of mainly educators. A lot of the women in my family are educators or teachers, and that's wonderful. But I feel that I guess I maybe went out in a different area. I guess I kind of pioneered myself within my family. So I feel that they laid a really good groundwork for that. Me to feel that, yeah, you know what, I can do this. I can complete the degree. And like this, I feel that originally it was mainly male dominated. And at times you do see that here in the Valley, I feel like I'm surrounded by more male pharmacists, but the females are coming out, and I feel there's a lot more opportunities, and a lot more women are being aware that, you know what, they can complete this degree as well, and they can pursue a career in pharmacy.
Well, in the past, you used a lot more of your, what we call mortar and pestle, where you would grind up tablets or whatever you had to, powders, into very fine powder. And then you would have to weigh those powders on a special scale to be sure you had the right amount. Like if you wanted to make 50 capsules of one thing, you had to have so much material. Then you try to divide it into 50 capsules. And those balances had to be adjusted every time you used them to be sure that they were working right. And then you had an annual examination. People would come by and check on them from the state to be sure that they were working correctly. And a lot more capsules used to be made at that time than they are now. Before the capsules came along, they called them powders. I don't know if you ever remember seeing a little, like wax paper. You would have to just put the powder in there and fold it, and it was a little paper bag. And then you had to take the powder like that, in water, or just swallow it, which wasn't very good. But I got to do some of that too. But then things started changing. Everything started coming out in tablets or capsules, or liquid for people that could not swallow. And you'd be surprised how many people cannot swallow a tablet or a capsule. You have to give them the liquid part of it. Or sometimes even by suppositories, so they cannot take it in any other way. Or by injection. So there's different forms that you can give the same medication, depending, or if the patient is in a coma or asleep, you have to give the injection, or an IV, through an IV solution. You have to know all your IV solutions also. And And then we started doing things for chemotherapy, like that. Put in a bag medication for people that could not swallow at all, and you would put in a bag concentrated nutrition. Of course, now you have Ensure, you have everything else, but then you used to have to do it through an IV, and you had to do it under a hood because that IV had to be sterile. Everything had to be sterile. You had to do it under a hood, and work there so the medication was not contaminated in any way. So there've been a lot of changes. Really, it's amazing now that I stopped to think about it. There's more. I think we really need more pharmacy schools. We don't have too many of them. They talked about starting one at A&M in Kingsville. I don't know how that is going, but we could use more. When I went to school, there was just the one at Austin, at UT Austin, or the one at Houston. They were the only two you could go to. And I think we need more. I really don't know what would make it more enticing for students to go. A lot of them are exposed through working in pharmacies, putting merchandise on the shelf and things like that. They get exposed to it. Of course, now you have pharmacy technicians too, but they have to be licensed also and pass a state board, like pharmacists. And when we used to have students that will come from UT and do their 1-year field work with us. And that way they could get exposed to the field, what was waiting for them when they would actually start working. And I thought that was very good, because then you could really find out, is this something that I really like? Should I continue, with this? They had that opportunity, which we didn't. I think right now it's so special that the students in high school can start taking college credits, while they're still in high school. We didn't have that opportunity, and I think that's great. They can start even then. The sooner they start, the better. And I feel so sorry for people that majored in one thing, and then they started working in that field and they didn't like it. And here they spent 4 years of their time or of their money, and then if they start working, they don't like that field. It's not what they expected. So I think doing field work is very good. I just went to school, did what I had to do. I wasn't thinking of myself at the time as a pioneer, but of course it makes you feel good. It gives you a good feeling that you could help in some way or do something in some way. And one time, a friend of mine, we were talking, and she introduced me to somebody else, and she says, "Do you know that she was the first Hispanic pharmacist that we had, the first Hispanic woman pharmacist?" And I thought, I never thought about it that way. I was just doing my work and what I had to do. But other people saw it, and I think I didn't see it. I didn't see it, but it's a good feeling that you might have helped in some way.